Ever feel like you're leading a cavalry charge while everyone else is already zipping around in spaceships?
Yeah.
That's kind of what the whole AI revolution feels like sometimes, right?
It is. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But that's why we're here, right?
Ah.
Today's deep dive is like, well, we're calling it your secret weapon for leading in this whole new AI age.
Definitely.
We're going to be diving into, or cracking open, I guess you could say, New W, The AI Savvy Leader by David Cremer.
And it's a good one. It's not just about, throwing a bunch of new AI tools into your toolbox.
Right.
Cremer really goes right for the heart of it all.
Okay.
How do we as leaders deal with all the anxieties, and let's face it, sometimes straight up fear around AI?
Yeah, no kidding. I think a lot of us feel that, even if we don't want to admit it.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's exactly how Cremer kicks off the book with this story about a company, their whole big AI project just completely tanks.
Really?
And get this, it wasn't because of the technology. The tech was fine. It was the leadership team. They were so freaked out by AI, this idea that AI was going to replace them.
Yeah.
They basically just checked out.
So they sabotaged the whole thing before it even started.
Pretty much. I mean, talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Wow, that's almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being afraid of AI leading to a very human failure.
It is. And it kind of highlights exactly what Cremer's saying. Just seeing AI as the enemy, as a threat, it's not a winning strategy.
Yeah.
He talks about these two different ways of looking at AI. One is as this job-stealing robot, coming for us all.
Right.
The other is AI as the superpower, but for your team.
Okay.
Not surprisingly, he's definitely on the superpower side.
So how do we actually make that shift, though? Because let's be honest, the whole AI is going to take our jobs thing,
Yeah.
it's a pretty powerful narrative.
It is. It's everywhere you look. But Cremer really digs into this idea of purpose-driven AI.
Okay, purpose-driven AI.
Yeah, he argues it's not just a tech upgrade, it's a chance for leaders to really step up. It's about looking at your values as an organization, your mission, all that, and asking yourself, how can we use AI to actually be better at this stuff?
Well, it's almost like AI is forcing a values check for the entire company.
Exactly, and this is where it gets interesting. He uses Apple as an example.
Okay, how so?
Well, you've probably noticed they've been awfully quiet during this whole AI arms race, especially with these large language models.
You mean like the chatbots and all that?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone else is like tripping over themselves to release something.
Right.
Apple's like, hold my juice box.
Yeah, it's true. They're definitely going their own way, which is kind of their thing, I guess.
But it's strategic. Apple's whole thing is privacy, right? User experience. And they are notoriously cautious about any technology that could mess with that, especially when you're talking about user data and these large language models.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they're not jumping on the LLM bandwagon just because it's the cool thing to do. They're being very, very intentional.
I mean, it takes guts, right?
Yeah,
In the tech world, everything moves so fast.
it does.
It's easy to get swept up in the next big thing and forget about, why you're even doing it.
And that actually leads to another point Cremer makes that I think is super important.
Okay.
Open communication. Whatever your AI strategy is, you got to let your team in on it. You can't keep them in the dark and just spring it on them at the last minute,
Right.
That just creates fear and distrust. Instead, bring them along for the ride. Explain what AI is, what it can and can't do, how it might change their roles, all that.
So instead of worrying about being replaced by robots, they can be part of the conversation.
Exactly.
I like that a lot better.
And, being open like that also helps you avoid some of those PR nightmares we've seen.
You mean like that whole thing with Microsoft's AI telling users to leave their spouses?
Yeah, exactly.
Oof. It might be funny to read about,
Yeah,
but if it happened to your company, not so much.
no kidding. And as funny or maybe cringe as it is, it does prove Cremer's point about transparency. If there'd been more open discussion about what AI actually is just data crunching, no actual feelings there, that whole thing could have been avoided.
So it's about being open.
Right.
And that actually leads into this whole idea of building what Cremer calls a human-centered AI culture.
Yeah, I like that phrase.
Me too. It's not just about having AI. It's about making sure that it actually benefits your team.
Absolutely. And, that means changing the question.
Oh, how so?
Instead of what can AI do, it's how can we use AI to actually empower our people?
Okay, I like that a lot better.
And a big part of that is getting your team involved in the whole AI process right from the start.
So not just, having the leadership team decide on everything and then kind of dropping it on everyone else.
Exactly, because honestly, who understands the day-to-day, the pain points, all of that, better than the people who are actually doing the work?
Right, makes sense.
So by actually including them in the design, you're getting those insights, but you're also building trust at the same time.
For sure.
It's not just some top-down thing, you know?
Not got to come from the ground up.
Exactly. And it makes the AI better, too.
How so?
Well, if you're actually getting input from the people who are using it every day, you're way more likely to end up with systems that are actually user-friendly.
That makes sense.
Instead of something that looks good on paper, but is a nightmare to actually use.
Right. No one wants that.
And it all ties into this other issue that Cremer brings up, this whole thing with trust in AI.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I feel like there's a lot of distrust out there.
There is. And, you know, Cremer talks about how employee trust in AI is actually going down.
Really? Even with all the, I mean, it seems like every day there's something new that AI can do.
I know, right? But I think people are starting to see the other side of it.
What do you mean?
Well, all the headlines about AI bias, about the ethical stuff, it's enough to make anyone think twice.
Yeah, I mean, remember that whole thing with the Amazon hiring algorithm?
Oh, yeah. The one that was basically screening out all the women.
That was a big deal.
Huge. And, you know, it really showed everyone that you can't just assume that AI is neutral just because it's a computer.
Right.
It's created by people, right? So our biases can creep in, sometimes without us even realizing it.
Yeah, wow, that is a scary thought.
It is. And Cremer says that leaders need to be upfront about that. That transparency isn't just about how AI works. It's also about where it comes from.
The data that's used to train it, all of that.
Exactly, because the more your team understands about AI, the good and the bad, the more likely they are to trust it.
Which is what you need if you want them to actually use it effectively.
For sure.
It's all about that trust.
It is. And, you know, Cremer even says that if an AI-driven decision directly assets someone, like if it's used in promotions, for example, you should be able to explain to that person how that decision was made.
Wow, that's a whole other level of transparency.
It is, but think about it. Wouldn't you want to know?
I would. I think it would make a big difference.
It could, but you know, it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, good.
We've talked about the downsides, but we also need to remember that AI can help us be more human in some ways.
Oh, how so?
Well, one thing I've been thinking about a lot is creativity.
Okay.
In a world where everything is data and algorithms, can we still be creative? Or are we going to turn into robots ourselves?
That's a good question.
And Cremer actually talks about that, this idea of nurturing creativity in the age of AI.
Okay.
He says that creativity is going to be more important than ever.
Really? Why is that?
Because it's the thing that algorithms can't replicate.
Okay.
It's what makes us human, you know?
Right.
So the question is, how do we encourage that kind of thinking when we're surrounded by data and logic all the time?
Yeah. How do we not get sucked into that?
Well, Cremer talks about creating a culture where it's safe to experiment, to take risks, even to fail sometimes.
Right.
He says that not every idea has to be perfect right out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's okay to try things and see what happens.
It's funny because for so long, the business world has been all about efficiency, about doing things right the first time.
It has, and, you know, maybe we need to loosen up a bit.
Yeah, maybe failure is okay every once in a while.
It's how we learn, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we need to remember what humans are good at and what AI is good at.
Because they're different.
They are. AI is great at data, at patterns, all that. But it can't replicate human intuition or empathy or that spark of creativity that comes from, you know, just making connections.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And that actually leads us to what might be the biggest decision for leaders in the AI age.
Okay.
Knowing when to automate something and when to augment it.
So when to let the machines take over and when to keep humans in the loop.
Exactly. And Cremer gets into some really interesting ethical questions about all of that. He says you can't just blindly chase after efficiency and profit if it means sacrificing, you know, human well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a tough balance.
It is, because that whole humans versus machines thing has been around forever, but it feels more, I don't know, real now.
It definitely does.
So how do we actually do that? How do we find that balance? When does it make sense to automate? And when do we need to be thinking about augmenting instead?
Well, Cremer says a good place to start is by really looking at the tasks that are already being done.
Yep.
Figure out which ones are truly repetitive, the ones that are basically just sucking the life out of your team without really needing any creativity or, you know, complex problem solving.
Yeah.
Those are the ones you want to automate.
So free up the humies for the more interesting stuff.
Exactly, the stuff that actually uses our brains.
Right, because that's where augmentation comes in, right?
Exactly.
Once you've gotten rid of the soul-crushing stuff, then you can use AI to actually give your team superpowers.
I like that superpower.
Like imagine giving your sales team real-time insights into customer behavior.
Oh, yeah?
Or your engineers, AI tools that can help them design and test prototypes way faster.
It's about making them better at what they already do.
Right, not replacing them entirely.
Exactly. And Cremer actually has some really good examples of companies that are doing this well in the real world.
Oh yeah, like what?
Well, this one that really stuck with me was this company that was using AI to make their warehouse operations more efficient.
Okay, that sounds pretty standard.
It does, but here's the thing. At first, they were just using a typical optimization algorithm,
Okay.
but it wasn't really working.
How come?
Because it was too focused on pure efficiency, it didn't take into account the actual, the human beings who worked there.
So the AI was kind of missing the point.
In a way, yeah, but then they changed how they were doing things.
Okay.
They redesigned the whole algorithm to include feedback from the workers to actually learn from their expertise.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it worked. Not only did efficiency go up, but so did worker satisfaction.
It was a win-win.
Exactly, and it showed that even in something like, warehouse logistics, you still need that human element.
We're not obsolete yet.
Not even close.
That's good to know, because I feel like with all this talk about AI and, algorithms taking over everything,
Yeah.
it's easy to forget about, the human side of things.
It is, and that's something that Cremer talks about a lot in the book.
Okay.
He says that all those soft skills, things like emotional intelligence, empathy, being able to communicate well,
Yeah.
those are more important than ever in the age of AI.
Which is interesting because you would think that with all this emphasis on data and technology,
Yeah.
those things would become, less important.
Right, like who needs empathy when you've got an algorithm, right?
Exactly.
But Cremer says it's the opposite, and he tells this great story about this CEO
Okay.
who was totally convinced that in order to lead in the AI age, he had to become like a tech genius.
Oh, I've met those CEOs, the ones who are suddenly taking coding classes.
Yeah, exactly. And this guy learned the hard way that while technical stuff is important,
Yeah.
it's not the whole story. What really mattered, what made him a good leader, was his ability to connect with his team.
To understand them.
Exactly, to understand their concerns, to communicate clearly about what was happening with AI and all the changes that came with it.
So it was those soft skills that really mattered in the end.
Totally, because that's what built trust. That's what helped him navigate all the, the inevitable conflicts that come with any kind of big change.
It's a good reminder that, at the end of the day, leadership is about people.
It is, and that's what makes this book so valuable, because it's not just about understanding AI.
Right.
It's about understanding how to lead in a world where AI is everywhere.
It's about being an AI-savvy leader, which is what this whole deep dive is about. So for everyone listening, what would you say is the key takeaway here?
I think Cremer says it best himself right at the end.
Yes.
He says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but basically he says that this book makes a really strong case that AI is a tool, not a takeover.
Okay.
But then he asks this really interesting question.
What's that?
He says, are we ready as leaders to actually use this tool responsibly?
Responsibly, ethically, I imagine he means.
Exactly, in a way that actually benefits everyone, not just the bottom line.
Well, it's a big question.
It is, and it's one that we all need to be thinking about.
Not just leaders.
Right, everyone, because the future of AI, it's not something that's happening to us. It's something that we're all creating together.
That is a great point to end on. So to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about.
Lots of good food for thought.
Keep exploring these ideas. Keep asking the tough questions. And most importantly, lead with courage, with compassion, because who knows what the future holds. But at least we can face it together.
Here.